Hello and welcome to the Once Upon a Generation program. My name is Karen Chase, and with me is Andrea Levitt. We co-produce the program with our seniors and storytelling students from the Freetown Lakeville Regional District. This idea came to us back in 2016. We've been doing it for 5 years. And the concept is to take my storytelling students who work with me in an after-school program and pair them with wonderful senior citizens from our area. For the past few years, we've had not only Freetown and Lakeville senior citizens, but we also have someone from Taunton for the last 3 years. We have a wonderful time. Normally, we will meet with the seniors for 3 workshops, help them find a story from their lives, a personal story between the ages of 5 and 25. They work on their story, they hone it, they edit it, and then they meet with the students. And the students hear their story and interview them. And then the students work on the story with Andrea and I for 7 weeks. And because they already have wonderful storytelling skills, it's very easy for them to take these stories and make them their own. We then have 2 performances. We have one at the Freetown Historical Society and at the Lakeville Library. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful way for the generations to bridge. They have a very strong bond now because the students and the seniors have returned year after year. And the students will be coming and joining us at 4:45 today. Since they're in school, they'll be joining us to share some questions with the seniors and also to perhaps share what they like the most about the program. This year it's a little abbreviated, as you know, because of COVID. And so we're doing it the social distancing way via Zoom. And we're grateful you're here. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea. She has a few things to share. Andrea.
Well, I am delighted to be back with all of you. Here we are again with our Upon a Generation program. We usually have a big crowd either at the Historical Society or at the school. And we are lucky all our seniors were able to get on and be here for you. And I would like to thank people before we get started. One of the groups I would like to thank is the Lakeville Cultural Council. They provided some funds for us to be able to do this job here today and be with the seniors and the students. I'd also like to thank LakeCAM. If it weren't for LakeCAM, we would not be here. And we are so glad to be here. I'd like to thank the parents and students for taking part and being so supportive. We couldn't do it without you. And we are going to introduce our first storyteller reader tonight. I want to just say that when we started long ago, about 5 years now, that we had people that came in and they were interested in writing and telling. And Winston was one of the first people that came to us, and we are so glad he did. He had a lot of words back then, didn't you, Winston?
Yes, I did.
He's cut down on some of the words, and I have to tell you, he is turned into a beautiful writer. He's had an interesting life, and he will bring some of that tonight. He was grown up on a farm. He grew up on a farm in New Hampshire. And he is the one that is responsible for our museum. If you've come to one of our programs, he's person that's responsible for our museum. He has so many artifacts and interesting things. He even has a bathtub, right, Winston, from when he was a child. So I am very happy to introduce my friend and a participant in this program for 5 years, Winston Liefeld.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All set to start?
You are ready to go.
Okay. 16 going on 17. Graduating from high school. 6th grade through 12th grade were the most painful, sad, lonely, disappointing, angry years of my life. Growing up in a small town of 800 people in New Hampshire, I thrived in a one-room schoolhouse that had two outhouses, one for the girls and one for the boys. It had a wood-burning stove to heat the room. It felt like home. I moved to the large school when I entered the second grade. It consolidated the full one-room schoolhouses into all 8 grades in one place. I loved my teachers and got all A's. The new school was surrounded by large forests. Recess was running through the woods playing cowboys and Indians. We would see how far we would go in the woods and still race back to our seats before the bell rang. School was fun. It came to a screeching halt when I and the rest of us entered the 6th grade. Mrs. Togus, a new teacher from out of town, was hired. She was to bring order and discipline to our new school. Her frozen scowl became her trademark. All us kids were doing well until she made us sit like stone soldiers. No talking, no writing until told to do so. No bathroom privileges. Recess was going to the bathroom before playing. I still remember his name, who peed in his pants out of fear of asking to go to the bathroom. Everyone stayed in recess, even if only one person did something wrong. Putting our heads down on the desk was usual for infractions of endless rules. Dunce Corner and Dunce Cat were resorted to at times. The echo of sit down, be quiet. If you think you're going out for recess on this beautiful day, forget it. If you think you're so smart, you do it. Give me that note. Read it over so everyone can hear. Don't talk back to me, young man. You didn't do your homework. No recess for you the rest of the week. Get over here. What do you think you are? The pain was day and night. School became a burden not only for us kids, but our parents. No one deserved an A. There was no right to be had. Wrong was the plan of the day. Today was pretty much built into us kids. There were no hugs, no smiles, no help, no hope, no incentive to make the grade. Parents were up in arms, blaming the children at first, and finally Mrs. Togus. Nothing was done about it, and so my parents sent me to the city school in Exeter to complete middle school and then go on to high school. Life just got worse. The city school was torturous for many of us farm kids. Some thrived in a new environment, but I was not one of them. Nothing was fun. Raising my hand in class could be dangerous if I had the wrong answer. It was like walking on a tightrope. Life became waiting for the bell to ring for the next class, and finally the last bell on the safety to go home. My effort to fit in was like putting a square block in a round hole. I withdrew. I walked with hundreds of kids to classes all by myself. Standing before the class to present a book report was like being in a firing squad. I wanted to die. I wanted them to die. My mind would go blank. I hated school. I felt totally helpless to change things. Being shipped to the city school, I was confronted with card-carrying licensed bullies. These are the ones I was supposed to beat up to get them off my back. My parents did not believe in violence to solve problems, despite the teachers wanting me to do battle with them. I was encouraged to break the school rules as the teachers turned their backs away so I could show the bullies a thing or two. I could only think how stupid and ridiculous school is. I brought my lunch to school. Now you'd think I'd finally relax and enjoy my lunch. Not so. My raw milk straight from the cow was way too crazy for anyone. I never heard of such a thing. They would whip my jelly jar filled with raw milk out of my hands and smash it against the wall. I hated their laughter, the ridiculing. What's the matter? What are you going to do about it? Was there anything normal in living? I said. I would have rhubarb sauce for dessert. They didn't know what it was, so it must be gross and had to be grabbed from me. Come on, get it, they taunted. Hit me. You know you want to hit me. What's the matter? Afraid to fight? Afraid to get your pretty little face messed up? I eventually had one city friend who was like me. He didn't fit in either. He was so excited when he got his driver's license. He yelled, "I'm free, I'm free." He loved driving around. I never had a chance to ride in his new, very old car, as I had to go home right after school to do my chores, cleaning out the cows and fill the wood box full for the kitchen stove. It was shortly after he got his license that he was killed in an automobile accident. I was so angry with God. I was sad. I was scared, alone again. I had no one to talk to. I learned where his parents lived and went to them saying who I was and how sad I was to lose my best friend. They were grateful I came. So you see why my C's and D's and flunks were not college material. At least that is what my principal told my mother. I think if he was alive today, he would have been shocked that I actually ended up getting my bachelor's degree at Barrington College and my master's degree at the University of Vermont. Who would have guessed that I would spend the last 30 years enjoying counseling with addictions to heroin? Many of my clients I loved were similar to the very same people that intimidated me in high school. The greatest effort in high school was to try out for spring track and cross country, to be part of a group and possibly attract girls. I always came in last. I never gave up, but I was not happy with myself. The coach was always encouraging and would say, "I can always count on you to come in, Winston." When others gave up, you were always there. That comment stuck with me to this day. I went to my high school graduation ball. I got enough courage after weeks of contemplation to ask a girl that sat in front of me in bookkeeping class to be my date for the graduation ball. Without hesitation, she turned me down abruptly. She did not want to be caught dead with me. It seemed that was it. I told my mom and dad. They were sad for me. They were shocked when I told them I was going to my graduation ball, no matter what. They could not understand, after hating school and being turned down, why I was still going to the ball alone. I had no answer for them, but in my head, I had to go. I felt driven to go, to celebrate an end to a very horrible, horrible experience. Mom and Dad let me use the 1954 Chevrolet to drive the graduation ball. I entered the gymnasium dressed in my hand-me-down suit. The bleachers on both sides of the gymnasium were filled with those coming to watch. I drew very little attention when I walked in. I was fine with that. Nevertheless, gymnasium was filled with contagious laughter, dancing, joking, whooping it all up, and the men showing off their satin-collared tuxedos and snapping the suspenders. The girls were gorgeous in their various muted yellows, whites, and rose-colored low-cut dresses. It appeared that some girls were a bit uneasy getting used to high heels, but once the dancing got in full swing, flat feet became preferred. I took this all in as I swept the area with my gaze and knew this was all foreign territory to me. This was not me, not yet. I did not stand alone long. I had to be here. It was my time. In the bleachers, I saw several girls who were probably 10th, 11th graders, giggling, pointing to various people on the floor, and keeping time with the music. I'm sure they were wishing they were graduating and dancing the night away. Without a moment's hesitation, I went up to a girl and asked her to dance with me. She accepted. I learned she was a 10th grader. I could tell she didn't have a clue about my reputation as a nobody, but did realize I was a graduating senior, and that was exciting to be asked by an upperclassman to dance. While we were dancing, I said, "Would you believe I've never danced before?" She didn't hesitate to reply, "I would never believe it," as she looked me straight into my eyes with a smile to die for. Wow, what a sweet thing she is. I danced the night away. Joy was my heart. I was flying. I could not take my eyes off of her. I loved her red dress and black hair draped over her shoulders, flowing with the music. I loved my arms wrapped around her waist and my hand grasping hers. I could not stop smiling. I watched seniors crying over high school coming to an end while I was celebrating the end of horror. And yes, by the way, I was accepted into a college in Rhode Island for that fall. As the night was winding down, I asked my date if she would like to get ice cream at the dairy fountain in town. I had coffee ice cream and she had a dish of chocolate. We ate spooning each other's ice cream. We savored the moment. Freedom was delicious. Our joy was consuming. I took her home and we said goodbye. I was bursting with happiness. I never saw her again, but I will never forget Kathy Cronshaw.
What a wonderful job, Winston.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, would you like to introduce Kathy?
I would. Thank you, Winston. And just so our audience knows, normally these written stories, these wonderfully written stories, would be performed by the students, not read. But because of the times we're in right now, the seniors have been so gracious in reading their stories for us. Thank you, Winston. That was wonderful. Our next storyteller and writer has been with us for 5 years. Her and her husband, Pat, are both part of a writing group, and we were delighted that they joined us. Kathy always brings such beautiful, poignant stories laced with humor. Sadly, this year, Kathy lost her sister, and this is a tribute to her sister. Kathy, when you're ready, please begin reading your story.
Thank you. And I have my partner here if it gets too much. A night in Newport from days gone.
Mute.
Story is about my brother-in-law the night I met him. Mom suggested we go to USO. There was a branch in Newport, Rhode Island, and this sounded like a lot of fun. We went planning our first trip to Newport. I spotted Pat, who was standing up against the wall with all the men there. He finally asked me to dance on the last dance. When we got home, I told Mom, this is the man I'm going to marry. We went to Newport every Wednesday night. We continued going, and I was one of the lucky ones. I met Pat. Wednesday was our night for the dance, and a whole group of us went every week. Most of the girls were very lucky and found a new boyfriend.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Kathy, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Okay.
We would like you to restart your story. I'm sorry because you were muted for the first part of your story. So would you mind restarting, please?
All right.
Thank you, dear.
A night in Newport from days gone past. If you're lucky enough to have a sister, I hope she was as wonderful as mine. She was just a sister to me, but but a friend also. She had we always had each other's backs, and that was the night I ended up meeting David. Mom suggested one night that we should go to the USO in Newport, Rhode Island, and it sounded like a lot of fun. And we went every Wednesday, and as we walked in, I spotted Pat. He was standing up against the wall with all the cute guys, and he went on Wednesdays also. And I told Mom we were going to marry this one. We continued going weekly to Newport. I started dating Pat, and all was well. Wednesday was our night, and there was a group of girls who had to put all the purse. Oh, sorry about this, guys. And carry the items like lipstick, Lucky. Each night when we went, we'd have one person, and they would carry everything with them. It was a purse, necessary items like the lipstick, and also the keys. Well, this particular night, it was up to me to carry and bring everything. My friend Carol ended up realizing we didn't have the keys, and everybody had gone back to Newport, and we went to find the purse, and I'm sorry, guys. I know it's not coming out well. Pat suggested we stop for a bite to eat this particular night as we were heading home. And when we realized we didn't have the phones with us, we didn't have cell phones at that point. So we went back to Newport, and the police picked us up and took us to back to find the man that Carol had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the police cruiser who picked us up, and they called Dad, and the officer asked Dad what happened, and doesn't this sound strange to you that they would be breaking into a car? And Pat said, and they said, no, not really. That wouldn't really be different for us. Anyway, David and Patty met that night, went to the police station, and then took everyone out to eat. When he was getting ready to leave and take us home, it seemed the whole thing seemed very strange to him. But David came and was taken. And Dave took us all to a local restaurant. And when I arrived in Newport, he looked at me and said, are you the crazy blonde that I have been hearing about all night? And I apologized because I knew it was going to be a hard one, and I know it didn't organize, but
You did a good job.
well, that was a very special night.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for sharing the story and for sharing your sister with us. We know it was difficult, but what a lovely tribute, sharing your sister with us. Thank you. Now, Andrea is going to be introducing William for us. Andrea.
Well, it gives me great pleasure. William came to us from Taunton. He was with us, I think this is your third year, William. And William has a love of baseball, always had a love of baseball. If you love baseball, you will love this story. Let me take it away with William.
Okay. Little League Baseball World Series is going to be soon upon us. So I thought I might take this time to tell my experience with Little League Baseball. Today's offering I call Little League Baseball is not for everyone. One day in early spring, the announcement was made in school that there was going to be Little League Baseball tryouts at the Little League Baseball complex on Saturday. My friends Alonzi and Joe and I were excited. We wanted to play Little League Baseball. When we got home from school that day, we asked our parents if we could go and try out. We told them we knew where the tryouts were and we had the money to take the bus and get there on Saturday. When Saturday rolled around, we went to the bus stop, took the bus into town, and we rode to the end of the line, which was the 11th Street stop. The complex was on 18th Street, so we had to walk the rest of the way. We didn't care. We were going to play baseball. And the second baseman, and be second baseman like the great Jackie Robinson. When we arrived at the complex, there must have been about 100 or more kids there already playing baseball. One of the organizers got our attention and said, "Listen up, fellas. I want you to line up behind the sign marking the position that you intend to play." Since we all wanted to be Jackie Robinson, we lined up behind the sign that said second base. There were about 16 or 15 or 20 of us wanting to play that position. Another man came to register us one by one. He questioned us and completed the registrations. The first question he asked was, "Where are your gloves?" We answered, "We don't have any gloves." He said, "Well, you're going to play second base. How are you going to play second base if you don't have any gloves?" We answered, "We thought you had the gloves." He said, "You have to bring your own gloves." Next, he wanted to know where we lived. And we told him the Valley Homes housing projects. And he said, "That's in Allegheny County. This is Beaver County. You can't play here. You have to go to Allegheny County to play." To which we answered, "We go to school here. Why can't we play ball here? What's the difference?" He said, "That's different because if you live in Allegheny County and you have to play Little League baseball there, that's just the way it is." We had no idea where Allegheny County was. We just barely knew where Beaver County was and where we were. So ended my Little League baseball playing career. Now, fast forward 20 or 30 years, and I know what county I'm living in. I know how to get to the baseball Little League complex, and I have purchased my son a brand new baseball mitt. He is registered to play Little League baseball. The coaches selected him to play right field. The game is going on. The batters are coming up. They're swinging. They're missing. They are popping up. They're doing everything but hitting the ball to right field. Bored out of his mind, my son decides to put his baseball glove on top of his head. Then he starts picking blades of grass and looking at interesting things that he found in the grass. And finally, mercifully, the last out has come. And he trotted to the dugout with the rest of the team. I walked down to the dugout and got his attention and told him he was to pay attention out in the field and play baseball. His team strikes out quickly. 1, 2, 3. And now he's back in right field position again. Baseball glove on his head, looking up into the sky, picking blades of grass. I yell out to him, "Get ready, get your glove off your head. The ball may be coming to you at any moment." And it was about this time that the mothers in the crowd, with their bags of cookies and juice boxes and participation trophies, attacked me like a bunch of angry hens. "Why are you yelling at him? These kids are here just to have fun." And I told them, "I'm yelling because he's way out in right field. And if I don't yell, he can't hear me." I didn't particularly take kindly to them criticizing me. Mercifully, my son soon decided that he no longer wanted to play baseball. So we entered him into a art class where he succeeded quite well. He learned to draw and he learned to paint grassy meadows, beautiful skies. Little League baseball is not for all of us.
I love that story. Everybody loved that story, William. I loved it the first time I heard it, and I love it now. I have the pleasure to introduce Karen again, because Karen is going to introduce Shirley Chase, one of my other favorite people.
Now, all of the seniors, are, have a special place in my heart, but this senior particularly because she's also my fabulous mother-in-law. Now, Shirley has been with us from the very beginning, and it's been such a blessing for me to be able to hear stories from her upbringing. She's had a very interesting life, and this year, she brings us a story from the time when she was but a blushing bride. I'm going to turn you over to Shirley Chase. You're on, Shirley.
Okay, here we go. A place to lay your head. Place to lay your head. The letter arrived through the mail. A letter from the government that would drastically change our lives. In disbelief, my husband, Ray, read, your assigned draft number had been drawn in the lottery. Report for active duty. He was given a date and location in Boston, Mass. He reported, as requested, and medical personnel determined to be physically fit. Uniformed Marines escorted him to the hall, where groups of men were lined up. Another Marine strolled by, and down the row of men pointed his finger, giving them a quick visual inspection. You, step over there on the other side of the room. When the group of men were gathered, the Marine loudly said, congratulations, you're now a Marine. That same night, my husband was placed on a train to Paris Island, South Carolina, for basic training. He was not allowed to return home and settle any personal business, not his first job, not his finances, not even to say goodbye to his family and friends. He was just gone like the winds of a fast-moving storm. After he completed basic training, he was furloughed, allowed to come home for a few weeks. When he arrived, I hardly recognized him. His hair was so short. He hardly smiled or talked. There were no signs of affection. He was like a piece of ice, so distant. But he did warm up slowly over the next few days. But it affected his personality for the rest of his life. After his furlough, he was assigned to an Air Force base in Cherry Point, North Carolina. He worked in the transportation department, driving school buses and jeeps to transport officers, pilots, other personnel to and off the runways and other parts of the base. One day he found himself escorting none other than famous Hall of Fame Red Sox baseball hitter Ted Williams, a splendid splinter. He also spent a good deal of his time in the service as part of the military police. After a few weeks of living in the barracks, he called me and asked, would you move down to North Carolina to live while I'm stationed here? He didn't have to ask twice. I purchased a suitcase, quickly packed, bought a train ticket, and was on my way to, I felt like $1 million babe. I was proud of myself. The trip took 24 hours, and since I couldn't afford a sleeper car, I slept sitting up. The entire way, I chatted with anyone willing to talk, and I watched as the scenery whizzed by. But I was so excited. My first trip alone, my first trip beyond Massachusetts. We finally reached our destination. I remember my first impression. Most every time, everyone was so tan from the sun, and I so white by comparison. The weather, how wonderful to have a good night's sleep. We stayed in a bed overnight in a bed and breakfast. Nice bed. Yay. Well, it was wonderful to have a good night's sleep after that long train ride. In the morning, the room, pushed by a slight warm breeze, birds were chirping, and suddenly church bells began to chime. It was a perfect combination of soft, comforting warmth and sounds blended together to welcome me. I remember it so clearly. We stayed the week in a guest house on the base. Evenings we searched for an apartment and finally found one. 1 3-room, choices were limited. We arrived at the apartment, and when we stepped in, oh gosh, no outside doors, no bathroom doors, no closet doors. We talked with the landlord and made a deal. My husband, the handyman, uh, made a deal with the landlord, and for a discount on the rent, he would hang the doors himself. We finally moved into the apartment and stayed over the summer. I made several friends who were building a career in the service. I was exposed to North Carolina's 3-day heat waves, 112 degrees, no fans, no air conditioners, no sleep. The thunderstorms were so intense, I would hide under the bed pillow, terrified. Times were tough, but there were still things to be grateful for. One day, a painfully thin, small, black and white flea-infected dog suddenly appeared in our yard. In an instant, I fell in love with her, and we immediately adopted her. I named her Dixie Girl. I loved her so much. She turned out to be a very devoted friend and member of the family. Fall came, temperatures were cooler, and now the apartment had no heat. The landlord kept putting us off. We finally gave up and found another place to live. We were lucky this time. The apartment was fine. It was in the country, and our landlord, also named Ray, and his wife Emma, and their 2 children were wonderful. We all became fast friends. The 3rd child was born to them during our stay, and they named her Shirley. I was very honored. The landlord owned a bulldozer, and Ray drove it a few times in his free time. The extra money was a blessing. At times we were desperate. One Thanksgiving, all we had for our holiday dinner was hot dogs and beans, both bought on credit. When Ray's tour of duty was up, our plan was to return to New England. Our new friends asked us to stay. We were tempted but missed our friends and family in New England. In our old junky car, pulling a homemade trailer packed with a few household items and tools, my Dixie Girl, and a few dollars in our pocket, we headed back to start a new life.
Wonderful, Shirley. Thank you so much. It gives me such great pleasure to hear stories from Shirley's, childhood, her young adulthood. It's a great way to get to know this wonderful seniors in our lives. Andrea and I can't begin to encourage you enough to do it. Thank you, Shirley, for that. Our next.
I intervene with one thing fast. My grandsons, my great-grandsons, I see a lot of them. My husband died in February. He used to see the kids a lot too. And one of them, the oldest one, he asked his grandparents, if we had pictures of Rara, that's what he called Grandpa, our great-grandpa. And he wanted pictures of him playing with them. And have you got any? He wanted to know. And we told him yes. And he said, what do you want them for? He said, I want to be able to look at Grandpa and see him playing with us. It means a lot to the kids for the stories.
Yes, it
of
does.
Family.
Absolutely. What a beautiful, beautiful way to share that, Shirley. Thank you. Absolutely. I'm going to turn this back over to Andrea so we can have another story from Joe. Andrea.
Thank you, Karen. Joe Sylvia is familiar around LakeCAM because he is behind the cameras. If you see him filming, sometimes you'll just say, hello, you heard his story here when we have no more COVID. Joe is from Freetown. This is only his second year with us. Last year, he took us to the World's Fair in New York. This year, he's taking us to Lincoln Park and a story about a bike. Joe?
Okay, I guess I'm on. All right, just one little correction I'd like to make. I live in Lakeville.
Oh,
Not Freetown, yeah. I visit Freetown often, though.
happy you do.
Okay, I guess we're ready. The Runaway, Hideaway bicycle. My first experience with a full-size bicycle was in the summer of 1956 when I was 8 years old. My family was at the Lincoln Park Amusement Park located in Dartmouth near the Westport Dartmouth town line. One summer evening, there was a raffle for a Schwinn bicycle, and our ticket was chosen. My father went to the stage to get the bike. It had 24-inch wheels, single-speed gear with a brake on the rear wheel. The brake was activated by moving the pedals backward. At that time, multi-speed gearing and front and rear hand-operated brakes were rare. The color scheme was blue with off-white trim. It was shiny, handsome-looking, and exciting. The raffle was the last event of the evening. Most of the park visitors had left, and those people at the raffle were also leaving. The park was gradually closing. There was room for a short bike ride. I asked Father if I could try the bike, and he said yes, but he wanted to stay close to me. With some help from my father, I was on the saddle. I then realized how tall the bike really was. To hold the bike upright when not moving, I had to move off the saddle to reach the ground. My younger brother David noticed the situation and said, "You look like you're going to fall over. You need training wheels." I did not appreciate the comment, and I wanted to show everyone I could handle the bike, even if not perfectly. Father said he would be behind me to help me stop. It would be a short, slow ride. I got back on the saddle and gradually moved forward down the concourse toward the clam bake pavilion. It was easy for Father to stay with me because I was going so slowly. At that slow speed, the bike felt wobbly. Holding a straight path was not easy. I needed more speed. Pumping the pedals faster, the bike speed increased. There was no wobbling. I was riding a straight route, sensing the feel and sound of the air, riding just like a big kid, except I wasn't a big kid. I finally realized that Father was no longer near me. Looking behind to locate him was not possible. I had to slow down. As I slowed, I approached the man and woman. The man noticed me approaching with a wobble, and he stopped the bike by holding the handlebars. What luck. He asked me how I got the bicycle in the park. I told him about the raffle. He laughed, congratulated me. Then he pushed me off down the concourse. That's not what I wanted. Once again, I was riding toward the pavilion. At that hour, few people were there. I was headed for the passageway between the pavilion on the left and the cooking area on the right. Riding through the passageway, I surprised the remaining people who did not expect to see a bicycle in that area. Kiddieland was beyond, and like the rest of the park, it was closed. I was quickly approaching the Tuna trolley ride. There was no way to avoid it. The ride was surrounded by a multicolored wood picket fence. I had to slow to a stop, quickly move forward off the saddle onto the asphalt before hitting the fence. As I slowed, I was moving closer to the fence. With further slowing, I started to wobble, and the fence looked even bigger. Before I could come to a complete stop, the front wheel rolled into a space between two pickets. The bike was stopped and upright. I was lucky. I hastily moved off the saddle onto the asphalt and moved the bike away from the fence. No one would know how I actually stopped. At the pavilion passageway, I met my father and David. Mother, not a runner, was not yet with us. He said all of us will walk to the car and find a way to place the bike in the trunk. We had no bike rack at the time. As we were walking to the car, David announced, "We saw you hit the fence. You need training wheels. At home in Fall River, I had several unnerving experiences riding the bike at the side of the street. Father was always with me. I did learn how to make a stop, awkwardly. One day I went to the cellar where my bike was kept. It wasn't there. I went upstairs to ask my father where it was. In the living room were my father reading a newspaper, my mother humming some unknown music, and David. I announced to everyone, "The bike is gone. Does anyone know where it is?" There was no response from anyone. My father was silent and motionless behind a fully open newspaper. Mother chose to hum more loudly. La 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 la, la la la. Again, a tune unknown to me. Singing was a method my mother would use to avoid answering a question. David was silently smiling and then started to giggle. Father then said that I was not yet ready to ride on the streets of Fall River. Soon he would find a quiet area where I could ride. The bike is somewhere where it is safe. No one told me where. David did say, "Now you're safe too." The location of the bike would remain a mystery to me until one day when we visited my mother's elderly Aunt Caroline in Somerset. Aunt Caroline lived in an older two-story house on Riverside Avenue. All of us were on the first floor. I decided to go upstairs and do something I liked, which was going where I shouldn't go. That was one of my favorite activities. I was at the doorway of a bedroom. I could hardly hear the voices from the first floor. On two opposite walls were saint statues, each about 3 feet high and covered with a shiny glass dome. Each statue was brightly colored and had eyes that appeared lifelike. As I trespassed about the bedroom, I felt like the statue's eyes were following me. It was silent and eerie in there. In a corner at the exterior wall, I saw a blanket that was covering something. Whatever it was, it had an irregular shape. I had to see what was under the blanket. I slowly lifted the blanket, and there it was. I found my missing bike. It was still shiny and new looking, except for a few scratches. Now I understood what my father meant when he said the bike is safe. It was being protected by the saints. I had to tell my parents I found the bike. I knew they would be pleased. Down the stairs I hurried and ran to the living room. In the living room, I excitedly announced, "I found my bike upstairs. The saints are protecting it." Again, complete silence to my announcement. Mother and father looked at me solemnly. There was no newspaper in front of my father, and my mother was not singing. My aunt was smiling a little as she looked at my mother and father. David was stifling a laugh. Father ended the silence, speaking to all of us. He said that I could ride the bike only here at the Riverside Avenue location. The property was a farm which extended from Riverside Avenue to the Taunton River. There was a firm dirt road located all around the acreage. It would be much safer for me to ride my bike on the dirt road and not on the streets. Everyone was pleased with the arrangement. I would be safe, my parents would be relieved, and my aunt would appreciate more visits from us. David, being David, added his advice. "You still need training wheels." Thank you very much, everyone.
I do love that story, Joe. I especially love the saints watching after your bike. Karen, I believe it's your turn to introduce Pat.
Yes, thank you, Joe. I especially love going back to Lincoln Park with you in your memory because I visited there a lot in my childhood as well. Thank you so much. Our last storyteller, but certainly not the least, is Pat Crenin. Pat lives in Lakeville and was a police officer for many years before his retirement. He's been part of the program from the very beginning with his wife, Kathy. And he always has something really fun to share. And he's developed a very strong connection to Boston and Austin, two of our storytellers who have performed his hilarious stories in tandem over the years, together, that is. This year, he brings us a wonderful story filled with humor, but also very poignant and very powerful story. Pat, you are on.
Well, when I started school, I was a model student. Got straight A's, good behavior, and paid attention well in class. I learned how to read from what we called a primer. And the nun would have the students take turns going up in front of the room, facing the class, while we stood on a milk box so that everyone could see you. And we would read a selection out of a small red book. The stories involved two young kids named Dick and Jane and their little black and white dog named Spot. I remember the day like it was last year. It was May 17th, 1958. I was 7 years old. 2 days later, life changed forever. Daddy was gone. My mother was devastated as she was making arrangements for my sister Jane and I to go stay with a close friend of hers. We were gone from Monday afternoon and did not return until we attended the funeral mass on Thursday morning. The casket was positioned in the front of the center aisle of the church. At that time, I was forced to take it on faith that my father was inside that box and gone forever in this world. I used to look out the window of our top floor apartment down the street towards the exit of the subway, where I would always watch him walking up the sidewalk on his way home from work. Slowly, over the next few months, I came to accept that that was the way life was going to be without a father. School really changed for me after that. In the third grade, my marks started to drop, and I went from honor student to a C and a D pupil. This continued for the remainder of my years in grammar school. Things just kept getting worse for me. It was the last day of the fifth grade. I had my final report card in my bag with the words, "To repeat the fifth grade," written in the upper right-hand corner of the card. This was probably no surprise to my mother, as she was probably told this was the best plan for me. But for me, I had no idea how I was going to explain this when I got home. Fear overtaking me, I climbed the 6 flights of stairs to our apartment and slowly entered. I gave the report card to my mother, and though disappointed, she didn't appear to be surprised. She then let me know that I was going to Camp St. Benedict in New Jersey tomorrow morning for 9 weeks. I was overcome with guilt, and I started to sob, as I didn't feel that I deserved something so good. But in retrospect, I think this was done to spare me the mean streets of the neighborhood that we lived in. We made the trip down to Port Authority for the ride over to New Jersey. I was going to be gone for the entire season, which was 9 weeks. We arrived at the camp and went to check in at the administration building. There we met the staff and some of the counselors. They took me up to the area where the cabins were. There was a large green with 10 cabins equally spaced around it. I was assigned to cabin 5 that summer and had 2 counselors, Frank Minet and Kevin Curran. They seemed to be real nice and were both in the seminary studying to be priests. There were about 20 other kids that lived in the cabin that summer. I met a lot of kids my own age who came from all over the tri-state area. They were really nice compared to the kids in my neighborhood. Every 2 weeks on Saturdays, which was turnover day, I would see a brand new, fresh group of campers come to the camp. That night, we would start off the camp season with a bonfire, which was held on the archery field. It was an opportunity for the new campers to meet the staff and to sing songs sitting around the campfire, usually hits of Peter, Paul, and Mary, who were very popular at that time. There was no such, there was no, there was so much to do at camp that kept you busy. For me, I was engrossed in all the activity. I never got homesick, although I never got homesick once, although I did see and hear some of the campers in my cabin cry themselves to sleep at night. Not me. This was a whole lot better than living on the top floor apartment in the city where it would be hot as hell and you couldn't drum up a breeze. Some of my new adventures included archery. I never shot an arrow before, other than one that had a 6-inch staff and maybe a rubber plunger tip on the end of it. They would start you off your first session with the instructions on this sport. We use 15-pound bows to start. They explain the use of an arm guard and why you put them on. And the targets were out about 15 yards. And the more proficient you became, the further the target was moved. Then came swimming. I didn't know how to swim that first season. I started off swimming in, quote, the crib, unquote. The lake had a concrete pier that was joined by a wooden structure that created a 3-foot swimming pool area. This was appropriately called the crib. The days you were assigned to swimming in the morning, you would receive lessons learning different strokes and being able to float and tread water. Eventually, you would let a counselor know that you were interested in taking a swim test in the deep water. Every time you were on the lake or the crib, you would always partake in the buddy system. They would require you to team up with a partner for that period. Every 15 minutes or so, a counselor would blow a whistle, and you would find your partner and join hands and lift them up over your head. After a count of the buddies was completed, you would hear the whistle again, and you could go back to swimming. I learned how to shoot a gun that year. We would have periods at the rifle range, and they taught us how to shoot a 22 caliber long rifle. Safety was always paramount in the minds of the instructor. It was always drilled into your head to keep the muzzle pointed downrange. With both the rifle range and archery, it was possible and reinforced to compete for different medals at the more proficient you became. In both areas, I earned a fistful of medals and awards during my stay at camp. One thing that I absolutely loved at camp was horseback riding. The first day, my fellow campers and I went to the corral and were given instructions on how to handle and act around horses. They had horses of every shape and color. They even had 2 Morgans, a particular type of horse that were named Chic and Doc. They were both a coffee-colored brown and were on loan from the Jersey City Police Department. Instead of dealing with large crowds, they now spent their summer vacation giving rides to young children. This became the most favorite activity for me while I was at camp those summers. I even took special lessons so that once or twice a week, I would get to go with a small group of campers out on the trails of the property and learn the difference between a trot, a canter, a gallop, and how to get the horse to go through these different actions. Not bad for a city kid, huh?
If everyone could unmute themselves, and let's give a nice round of applause to all our seniors who have never been the ones that have been on stage. It's always been the students. Good for you.
Of everyone. Yes, wonderful.
We have a little surprise for you. We have our students who have now joined us, and they have some questions for you. So I am going to ask, let me find her, Lexi. And she's going to ask a question to Winston. So let me just spotlight you, Lexi. Hello, Lexi. Welcome.
Hello.
I hear you have a question for Winston. Be ready. Winston.
So I was wondering, the dance that you went to in your story, what did it look like? Because I don't know if it would be different from, say, the dances that we the students go to now, or if it's the same.
That's a great question. Here, I'm going to spotlight Winston so he can answer that.
All right. One of the things is they had these huge, and I don't know if they have them now, but these huge bell-shaped gowns. They were just, and so I don't know if they do that now or not. I think they're more now is strapless and slimming and things of this sort. I don't know whether so that was something. I just always the guys were always doing the snapping their suspenders and having these shiny tuxedos and stuff. So it was just different. It was in a gymnasium. I don't know if they still have all these people come to a ball anymore, but they at that time it was a big crowd all around.
Well,
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
thank you, Winston. Yeah, I think you did. I like the snapping your suspenders. I wonder, Winston, would you be snapping your suspenders?
not with my hand-me-down suit.
I have another question from Molly, and she is going to ask Kathy a question. Hello, Molly.
Hi.
Hi, Molly.
So at the dance that you went to, what was it about Pat that made you realize he was the one you wanted to marry?
Ooh, good question.
I actually did know right away. And it was, there was a rule. You had to dance with anybody who came to you. And Pat was in the Navy. And I walked in and my girlfriend said to me, look at it. And I said, look at that guy. I'm going to have him come over by the end of tonight. And her name is Ginny. And at the end of the night, she came walking out and she said, you did it. You did it. You got him to come over. But it was what was called the USO, and it was for Navy personnel. And we went every week, and it worked.
Here I am.
Oh, Kathy, thank you. Your handsome devil there, Pat, I guess, coming right over. Was she the most beautiful girl there?
Oh, most definitely.
Remember, you're on camera, of course. Yeah. We have another question from Aurora, and Aurora is going to ask William a question. Hello, Aurora. Thank you for coming on. Welcome.
How did you feel when they said that you couldn't try out? Were you like disappointed, or did you really want to try out, or are you kind of just like, okay?
No, we really wanted to play, and we grew up learning to deal with a lot of disappointments. So it really was on to the next case. We like basketball, we like football, so baseball was forgotten quickly.
Now, Karen, I think you have someone else coming up.
I do. Molly wants to ask Shirley a question about her story. I'm interested to hear. What do you have, Molly? What is your question for Shirley?
So I wasn't really prepared with a question for Shirley.
Oh, well, I bet you could ask
one.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I thought you were. Is there anything you can think of that you would like to know about her story?
I think while I was listening, all my questions were really answered.
Oh, well, that means you're a great writer, Shirley. That's wonderful.
Thank you, dear.
Shirley.
Okay. How about
Anybody have one?
any one of the student or seniors can ask Shirley? We've opened the floor.
Well, I would like to know, I'm going to ask you a question, Shirley. Because you're so close to your family, because I know that about you, how did it feel to be so far away from them when you were with your husband, when he was in training?
How did it feel? I was homesick. That is why, and I had wanted a child, and I was been married for a few years and wasn't happening. So I missed the child. What I was missing was my life. I wanted to get on with my life. I think that's why I take to the dog so much. You know, I really put a substitute in there, something I could love, something I could squeeze, something that spent their time with me.
And Shirley, for those of you who don't know her in the family, she's known as Dr. Doolittle because any kind of animal flocks to her. So I'm not surprised it was an animal in her story. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you.
My own heart.
Yes. Now, Boston. Boston has a question for William, correct?
No, well, Boston has a question, I think, for Pat. And
I'm sorry. No, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Joe, so I was wondering, when you were about to crash, did like everything slow down and could you like see like every little thing and like everyone's reaction around you? Or was it just like a big blur?
This is approaching the fence you're referring?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Well, no, I'm just concentrating on trying to stop and do not wobble and try to stay in balance. But the bike decided to fall me, went right into the picket fence and held itself up. Yeah, I was just concentrating the fence, the bike, and trying to stop without tipping over. That's the only thing I was concentrating on.
That's a good question.
It is. That is. And again, Boston has a question for Pat. And now, of all people, Boston really knows Pat well. So I'm curious, what question do you have for Pat?
So I've one of them is, were you like allowed to eat any snacks like ring dings or any sort of stuff like that during camp? Or were you only allowed to eat what they provided? Or could you bring your own food and stuff?
No. When I described the center of the camp, they had a huge green, large oval green. And at the base of that green, there was a flagpole. And there was what they call a canteen, was at the bottom of that, just, maybe 25 feet away. So every evening after supper, the canteen would open and you could go down to the canteen and you could buy like candy or soda. There were no ring dings, but you could buy snacks and whatnot for the evening. You were allowed to eat. I mean, it was a camp. It wasn't jail. But no, it was very good. It was a nice life for the 2 summers I was there.
I think we should let them in on the joke.
I was going to say the exact same thing, Andrea. Go ahead.
Every year, Boston and Austin have a story from Pat, and the story every year sort of changes, but always the ring dings and the pickles or something is in the story. So these 2 boys have a great relationship with Pat. And to bring in the ring dings is just like saying hello.
Because that was in his very first story. The ring dings was in his very first story. That was really good. Really good, Boston. Now, before, Andrea, closes our wonderful time together out, we just wanted to ask, a couple of you if any of the seniors or any of the students would like to share maybe just one brief thing what you like the most about this intergenerational program. So I'm going to call on somebody, and if you want to say pass, that's fine. If you haven't thought of anything to prepare.
We have a wonderful person that just came to the door, and she loves to cook. I think that's who it is. Was it Danny?
Yeah. Okay, no problem, Kathy. We'll just
back.
Okay. So Boston, I'm going to start with you since you were the last one with us. What's one thing that you like about this program?
Well, I really liked that how this year you were able to teach everyone how to use Zoom, so we were still all able to like get together and see each other during this time.
Oh, that's lovely. And I know that you were pestering your mother to find out what was going on with the program because he missed everybody. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. How about you, Joe? This is only your second year. What made you come back this year?
Well, the stories are interesting. It's an exciting experience to interact with different generations, with young and old people and sharing experiences. So I hope to do it again, even if it's with Zoom. Just do it again. I think it's a therapeutic process for everybody, especially now. We're finding a way to continue our lives.
That's such a wise, insightful thing, Joe. Absolutely, very therapeutic. Thank you for that. And we're so glad you came back this year. What a great story you brought us.
I'm already putting together ideas for future stories.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Aurora, do you have anything you want to share that you like about the program? You've been with it so long.
I like that I can hear about like the past and how life was, but like from actual people instead of maybe like an article or a book that I read.
And you are an avid reader, right, Aurora? You're always reading. I know that. William.
Yes.
You came to us 3 years ago. You found us when you saw an advertisement. You decided to come from Taunton, which is fabulous. So what brought you to, what made you stay?
One of the things is I enjoy watching the kids. This is my third year, and you see how they grow and how they change. A couple of the kids came on this year, and I almost didn't recognize them. They've changed so physically, and obviously the growth in their stories that they tell. I also enjoy listening to the stories that my fellow seniors present to us. Winston's story this year about his dance, it reminded me of a prom that I went to. I went to a senior prom as a freshman. Things like that, they bring back fond memories to you.
And it's interesting you said that because Andrea always says one story calls another, which means somebody else's story sparks a memory, and that's wonderful. Pat, what about you? What do you like about coming? You've been with us for 5 years.
Yeah. First of all, the two youngsters that I'm dealing with, Austin and Boston, if I was their age, I would be hanging with them like wallpaper on a wall. They are just so enjoyable to be with. And it's good for me in the creation of stories to go back to those days of when I was a youngster and some of the different things that I did, because I grew up in a city environment, whereas the students that we're dealing with in this group grew up in a country environment. So it's a little bit different. I remember they didn't know what the word tenement meant.
That's right. That's right.
You know.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Yes.
Andrea, I'm going to turn this over back to you.
All right. I want to, in closure, say thank you to all our students and our seniors for really coming together and appreciating each other. It is an enormous undertaking, and so to get on Zoom first, right? Now you're on Zoom. All my seniors' windows and doors have opened. And for the students, I love that you came on, and I love that you all have made friends. So with that, we end our Zoom intergenerational program, but it is not over, and because all the stories have to still be told. We hope that next year we can come and tell in person, but if not, there's always Zoom, and we know we can do it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.